becoming like them, and so somehow attaining to the resurrection from the dead. So there's this labor of following Jesus that is both a gravitational pull and an effort on our part. How do we go about doing that? Well, some great thinkers in our past have had ideas about this. And the idea that we're going to be exploring is called creating a rule of life. The idea here is that spiritually, we're all like gardens. In order for the things, how many gardeners do we have? I know we got some master gardeners here. Joel told me one time, Joel is a master gardener, and I was talking to him about mysteries of gardening in Bellingham when I first arrived. And I was talking to him about horsetail. How many of you fight with horsetail in your gardens? Okay, yeah, we do, or yards, or anywhere. And I said, Joel, how do you get rid of horsetail in the garden? And you said, you may not remember this. He says, well, what I've found in gardening is that the things that you pull out, you'll end up over time getting less of. And the things that you leave and cultivate will end up growing more of. And I thought that was just genius. So if we don't have to, eliminate all the horsetail at once, it's just like keep pulling it when we see it and get rid of it, then there will be less of it overall. And if we cultivate and plant and fertilize and make grow the healthy things that we want to have in our gardens, then we will have a better garden that we're more satisfied with. So it is with the life of disciples, that we need support, intention, and structure. Again, think about gardening. If you want the tomato plant to go strong and fruitful, you might have to stake it up. You have to give it sunlight. You have to prune things. That's what the idea behind the rule of life. The idea is originally credited to a saint of the church, a monk named Benedict from the 6th century. And we're going to learn more about Benedict as we go along. This is why sometimes you'll hear this rule of life referred to as the Benedictine rule. We're going to call it the rule of life because I think calling it Benedictine makes us feel like, oh no, we're Catholics. Well, it was the church, the entire universal church. And so many good ideas from the mother church, and this is one of those that we have here. So Joan Chittister, who is a commenter on these things, says that the spirituality that emerges is one charged with living the ordinary life extraordinarily well. I don't know about you, that really speaks to me. I find as I go through life as a Christian, a lot of it is pretty mundane. We get up in the morning, we put our pants on one leg at a time. We provide our meals to ourselves and those we're responsible for, and it can get to feel like life is very ordinary. Yes, there are mountaintop experiences. We had Easter Sunday morning. But the majority, 364 days of the year, we're doing an ordinary life. The rule of life is about tuning into what God is doing in the ordinary aspects of life, so that the extraordinariness of God can enter into all aspects of our life as we seek to reconcile God with ourselves, with others, and with God's world. There are 5 practices, and what we'll do for our class structure is that we have a focus on each of these 5 practices in the next 5 weeks. So next week, for instance, I think Gordon, you're going to teach on prayer. Following week, Mike is going to teach on study. Then I will do recreation. I wanted to seize that one. I had the privilege of saying which one I wanted to do first, and I said I'd like to do recreation. After that, Dave will do work, and Julie will wrap up with So the class goal is very explicit. We want to create our own rule of life. We don't want you to walk away from this class just thinking, well, that was an interesting intellectual exercise. We want this stuff to get in your marrow of your bones. But we want that not just me and Julie telling you, or me and the other teachers telling each of you what to do. There's going to be an opportunity to grapple with this as individuals and in some small groups. We use the word rule of life because that's what Benedict called it in the 6th century. Sometimes we'll get a little reaction to that and say, oh, we don't really like rules. We're Protestant. We protest against rules, right? So if we don't like rules, why develop a rule of life? And the answer to that is maybe understanding where the word rule comes from. It's from the Latin regula. I heard a talk at a Presbyterian meeting last year where this very wise spiritual director was talking about regula. And this is a little earthy, so you have to bear with me on this. But when we talk about keeping regular, you say, okay, I'm glad I'm regular, meaning that you eliminate the waste, and you eat and you eliminate the waste. You stay regular in your diet and your gastrointestinal system. This is the idea of eliminating the waste from your spiritual life. So again, like that gardening analogy, the things that are unhealthy you pull out and you get rid of, the things that are healthy you keep in, becoming better disciples by God's grace. You might also think of it as a covenant. A covenant is a way of making intentions known. Presbyterians are very familiar with this idea of covenant. It's that inner organizing principle that governs our relationship with God and one another. So what we'd like you to do, just to kind of start chewing on this a little bit, is divide into groups of 3. You may want to sort of cluster your chairs or however you want to do it, but there's something we think really good about groups of 3, and take a few minutes to share a bit about your story of your life, the story of your faith as it happens in the midst of your life, and to just talk at first about a significant transition or a significant experience in your life that has shaped you. You may not be able to get to all 3 of these things, but at least pick one. You're going to share about a significant transition experience, or you're going to describe what is a typical day in your life look like. So say something about, how does your day go? What do you do? How do you feel? Why? You could also think more broadly about a typical week, month, or year. And what do you do to maintain? PESO is just physical, emotional, spiritual, and other health. Because we want to sort of invite you into thinking about, what is it that I do to keep myself healthy? So the first question is just about major transition or milestone. Second is, what is a typical day like? And third is, in your typical schedule, how do you take care of yourself, your health? Got it?
And we would really like it if spouses weren't together in this. I think we'll learn more if we separate and share our stories, because the spouses know each other's stories already. So I think if you don't mind just moving around a little bit to form little clusters that are not the normal people that you're living with.
Are you with us?
Okay.
Ready to do it? Okay, ready, break.
Ready, set, go.
Okay.
We'll have about 10 minutes for this, so everyone needs to, be a little, try to make sure everyone gets a chance to say something. So, are you guys getting anything from this? Can you hear it okay? You can be your own group. I would encourage you to be your own group. And I'll mute me so we don't hear. Oh, well, it doesn't matter if we hear you. There's enough noise. So you guys do this on your own.
You want that?
Sure. Well, who wants to share in our group? I would just say, I guess, that I think retirement was a really big transition.
Mhm.
And I'm still, I mean, even, whatever years into it now, I still find I'm transitioning and figuring out what I do want my days to look like. And of course, COVID didn't help with that because everything got changed. So I didn't get a real good rhythm. And then there was that. And now we're kind of just barely coming out of it. So I can see why, I mean, I kind of am hungry for figuring out a really good structure and balance of these various things in life. But to me, when I was working and having kids and working, I didn't have a lot of time to figure out a lot besides that, just kind of survival and enjoying it all, but just not having a lot of free time. Now I have way more free time. And it's like, well, I have to have something meaningful to do with it. So that's been my big one.
Well, I was going to comment that before retirement, how much of the day controls you versus how much you control the day? Certainly after retirement, you have a lot more flexibility to determine what's going to happen and how you do it. But before retirement, you've got so many responsibilities that are imposed upon you, especially on a job, obviously, that I'm not sure how much effort you can put into controlling your spiritual life, or however they want to put it. What do you think?
I definitely think it's different.
I would have said retirement, but I've been retired for since I was 74. So it's been a little while, but a major transition probably is dealing with cancer and all the issues that come kind of out of that, and priorities and flexibility or the limit thereof. So the major transitions, obviously, the longer you live, absolutely do change as it affects our daily life.
Mhm. But in the areas that you do control, what do you do about increasing or improving your spiritual connection, or your connection with God, or your worship level or something?
Well, for me, it's just every morning early at breakfast time, even while I'm eating breakfast, I start my daily meditation on some scripture. And in my case, I use quite a bit the guide on the daily bread for that purpose, but I use others obviously from time to time. So you can't get your day started too early without some meditation and focus on what's God saying to me today.
Mhm.
And hopefully that even when it consciously gets out of our mind in the daily tasks that follow, it's with you, and it affects all your thoughts and decisions.
Dory, you start the day off with our daily bread, and
We finish it.
We finish the day with our daily bread. Our last activities are prayer, both Lord's Prayer,
Mhm.
another familiar prayer, and then a prayer tied in with the daily activities, giving thanks, and some supplication also, particularly if there's any in our friends or grandkids or kids. that need prayer for particular activities. And then we also read our daily bread, and then add to that in the Lent and Advent seasons, the special readings from related scripture and meditation material.
And for the last few years, we've been on Wednesday mornings, we tune into our old church in Richland, and our minister does a Bible study for an hour. And so we do that every Wednesday morning.
And for the last 6 months, it's been on Proverbs, which is an interesting alternative to the more scriptures that we're used to studying. Another thing that retirement has enabled us to do and is that we do extensive exercise. We exercise for an hour and a half in the morning, combination of stretching and aerobic, etc.
On tape.
Using tape, DVDs. And then we go for a walk in the afternoon. And we typically walk 2 to 3 miles in the afternoon. Now, if it's a bad rainy afternoon, we don't, but other than that, you know, like walking around Lake Padden or a couple times around Northridge or Watcom Falls Park.
I can tell the difference it makes because I had COVID for the last couple weeks. It's over now, but I started exercising again after not doing it for 2 weeks, and I'm kind of sore. So it does make a difference.
Mark, how do you feel?
Yeah, no, I concur on some of these. It's been a little difficult. I recently, retired also, but I did have a bout of the cancer that you were describing, and that definitely, leaves an impression on you if you come out, on the good side of that, which so far I have. It's just something that I wasn't thinking about when I retired. Everyone's human and things happen. I think we've since that, which was fairly recent.
How do you not be so cute? Huh? Do you want treats?
Oh, looks like
No,
we're
I'm
going.
not gonna give you treats right now. You are just the truth. Rocky, look. 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 Yeah, hi.
Anyway, the exercise thing is just tantamount at
That's my hand. Hey,
feeling even
Rocky,
better than in my case than I do now,
where you
and
going?
we just haven't
Where's your
got
treats? Where are
that
your treats?
it really works for
Your
us.
treats?
It's just a matter of 1 foot in front of the other, and doing something that
Yeah.
can kind of
Go find a treat for you.
keep us on
Yeah,
track a
hold on.
little bit.
Right.
I don't know. I wish I had some answers to things.
Hey, hold on. I'll
That's why
finish the class.
Yeah.
I'll get you treats. Where's your doggy bone?
She's gone.
I'll share.
Pat, you're not muted.
I turned off Lydia.
You can.
Oh,
Well, I guess a question I have is how important is structure to your, I always don't like the word religious activity, but you know what I'm talking about, versus sort of winging it and just praying and maybe singing in your heart and so on. How does putting a structure on this by, say, using some written material, my daily bread, for instance, and that sort of thing, is that do a better job of keeping you where you want to be versus just ad-libbing.
That kind of takes us back to the clearing out the weeds that Greg mentioned. Because if we don't do things that clear out the weeds, or to let the Lord show us where we're missing the mark, whether it be small or large, if we don't do that, then we're not going to probably do it on our own, except through prayer and meditation, etc. So yes, that's, and I think what we want to do is, of the three things that Greg mentioned, the number 2, a typical day, and number 3, what keeps our life in balance, or at least that's what I wrote down. Hopefully we get to the point where 2 and 3 are one and the same. So our ordinary day does things in it that keep us in balance if we keep in touch with the Lord and keep our spiritual development right. I think one of the big things for me at late in the day is I've come to evolve to the confession of times during the day when I could have done a better job or responded better, whatever it might have been. So it's a time of reflection and confession as well as celebration.
I think structure is super important, because if I don't, well, and this happens all the time, something will happen early in the morning, so I don't get to do the meditation at the time that might be the most beneficial in a organized, structured situation. And then I'm like, well, I'll get to that later. And, pretty soon it's later and later, and now I'm sleepy and I'm going to try to do it. And then I'm like, well, maybe it's not worth doing it because I'm going to fall asleep, So anyway, having structure and a time that's set aside on a regular basis, and a backup plan to get, obviously you just get up earlier on those days, but, anyway, I think structure is key because best intentions,
It looks like they're coming back. Shall we turn their microphone on again, I guess?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. Maybe I can't. Hey, folks, please turn the microphone back on the computer there that's looking at Greg.
About how we live our lives. And so we don't want to take too much time to go over to really debrief all of that. But we're thinking about that third question about your typical week and what you do to maintain your physical, emotional, spiritual health. Were there any things that came up that you thought were interesting in that part? Or were there any things where you thought, oh, gee, I've never thought about doing that. Like I've never thought about that part of my life. Julie? Yeah.
In that third one, I think what we all talked about was the intentionality of it. And it doesn't just happen, it happens again.
Well, you've taken most of my next part. Right there. That's great. I'm glad we're all on the same page in that one because it doesn't happen, does it? Just if you just live your life without a plan, days go by. And I mean, I've been guilty of this many times myself where like, where did that day go? I just didn't accomplish anything. I didn't, it wasn't productive in any way. It just sort of slipped by. And so this is what I think, this is how this rule of life can help us. Any other comments about that? Yes.
Just when I see that, what do you do to maintain physical, emotional, spiritual, and other health? My almost immediate answer is not as much as I wish I did.
Right.
And then also just to think about how many of those things are easier when there are other people who are encouraging me. I mean, maybe for spiritual health, I'm in a small group, or so it's not a completely solo enterprise. I'm at least talking to other people about what I'm doing in that arena.
Yeah, it does take a community often to keep us on track. And so we can be that for each other, which is wonderful. Well, this leads us kind of into,
Can I give an answer to that third question without describing the practice?
yes,
What helps me maintain that kind of health is to not take myself too seriously.
oh,
It's been a learning process, to have a sense of humor. Because God has a sense of humor, and I have proof that he has a sense of humor. He made you and I, didn't he?
and my proof for it is he made a moose. Like, I was skinny legs, big antlers, big body, like to me, that's his sense of humor, and creating a moose, like, who does that?
But it's taken time to learn
Right,
not to take myself too seriously.
right. And I don't know whether everyone on Zoom caught that, but Gordon said, having a sense of humor is part of the way of maintaining health. I think that is so important, not to take ourselves too seriously. Okay, so if we go on to then discipleship. This is all about, I think, growing in discipleship. And Greg mentioned that word before. As the new elder of discipleship, this is certainly on my heart. And I've been trying to do some study on people. What does that even mean? How do we grow in discipleship? What is a disciple? So maybe let's start there. What is a disciple? What does that mean?
Student, wow.
Okay, student, follower. Yeah, so
Those cantankerous, dusty-footed guys that walked around with Jesus.
well, they were, weren't they? Because they were both students and following, right? It's not enough just to, if you say it's a Jesus follower, well, what does that even mean? It's following what? And with following, it's not just following the direction, but following the ways and the teachings and trying. My understanding is that the disciples would sit at a rabbi's feet and just listen to the word, memorize a lot of the things they were saying so they could repeat them back. So they could then be the teacher later. So it wasn't just to sort of passively follow, but rather really engagingly follow and trying to almost mimic what the rabbi or the teacher was teaching them. And then when we think of this rule of life, well, this discipleship, a monk was the one that came up with this, but this is not just for pastors and monks and martyrs and those people that we think of as the heroes of faith. But God told us all to do it. And in Matthew 28, 19 to 20, his commission, Great Commission, as you probably all know it, go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I've commanded you. And this command wasn't just to people of old or to pastors, but the command is for all who follow Jesus. Every Christian has been given gifting. God has created us for a purpose and given us gifts that we are to share with others. That we are to build up the church. We are to then go out and make disciples out of nations. But how do we make other disciples if we don't know how to be a disciple ourselves? If we don't have that building that we're trying to work into, then how do we share that with someone else? So this class is about trying to help us get some tools and framework around how to live into this more. In 1 Peter 4, 10 to 11, says, each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. If anyone speaks, they should do so as one who speaks the very words of God. If anyone serves, they should do so with the strength that God provides, so that in all things God may be praised through Jesus Christ. And so this is it, the things that we've been gifted with, we're to use. And we can, by putting some intentionality, that word that Barbara mentioned, and certainly it doesn't happen if we aren't intentional about it. So, but it all starts with listening to the Spirit. What gifts have you given me? What do you want me to do? How can I live into this calling? We want the Spirit to be leading us, not just charging forth saying, hey, I'm good at this, I'm just going to go out and do it, but rather be in harmony with where God's leading us to, so that the first act is listening to the Spirit, and then to move forward as he is telling us. So this is to develop habits, and habits are, as you know, we need to keep repeating them. We have to use them for a period of time before they really become a part of us. But this is way different from just like a New Year's resolution to me. To me, it's more like I've got a new assignment in life. If I had a new job or a new vocation, I'd have to do some preparation for that, learn how to do this properly. I'd have to study, figure out what the right ways of doing it, see how other people are doing things, and put some intention into it. And that's how I think of this, is that God's given us a calling, a charge to go forward. And so we need to equip ourselves for that. So hopefully this class will prompt us to craft some plans. I guess I'm calling to craft some plans that we can live into our potential. And all of us will have, do you think all of us will have the same rule of life?
No.
That's maybe a rhetorical question.
Yeah.
Of course not, right? We all have different gifts. We all have different circles of influence. We are planted in different spots, even though we're all in this congregation. When we leave this congregation, we go out into different families. We go out into different neighborhoods. We go out into different passions, like things that we love to do. And so we're interacting with different people in different situations. So our rule of life will all be different. And that's great. There's nothing. So when you see other people, don't be thinking, oh, gee, I should be more like that. This is not about shaming people into anything. This is not about making one better than another. It's about being authentic with what we feel God is doing in us and through us and where he's leading us. And just to try to put a framework around that to help us move into that more fully. So we just want to give you a few examples of rules of life, and they're on a sheet of paper that you have here. But Pope John, of course, he had very specific things: 15 minutes of silent prayer, 15 minutes of spiritual reading, and then morning things, and then before bed, and then turning to God in prayer for the day. And then, but then Dorothy Day, hers was very general. She just, read the Bible daily, keep a journal, receive, of course, she was Catholic, so receive Eucharist daily. And then we go on to Martin Luther King Jr.'s, and his is fairly lengthy, very specific things that he is working to do. Pray daily to be used by God so that all may be free, sacrifice personal wishes so that all may be free. And you can read them, I don't need to read them for you, but I just feel like he was very specific. And I think being specific is really helpful. This goes on to next page. So yeah, refrain from violence, strive to be in good spiritual and bodily health. I mean, so his was lengthy, Dorothy Day's was really short. Again, ours will all be different. These people all had specific callings and all of theirs were different.
This seemed to be a practice of attitude, whereas some of the others are more like an event, a timed event.
Good point, yeah.
But, yeah, I think we could all probably, I keep wondering about where's serendipity in life and creativeness, being able to do things on the spur of the moment. I think there's still, we probably defer way too much that direction, not enough to the discipline, saying, I need to take time to do this, and I need to take time to do
Yeah,
that.
does anyone else want to speak to that?
I don't think we're in danger of being over-regimented.
My life is not, maybe others are, I don't know, but it's certainly not for me. But what were you gonna say?
Oh, well, there's two key words that hit me that this class is all about.
Yes.
One key word you've already said is intentionality. As I look at your examples, and then the other key word is structure. That I see this class as we need to develop a structure of intentionality so we don't float through the day.
Right.
But I like what Dan said, the balance. There's also serendipity, there's freedom. So we don't want the structure to strangle us. We need a structure. We need to know that we're not going to float through the day. But within the structure, we also need to have personal freedom.
For sure.
That hey, we're not, if something doesn't work out on a certain day, the world's not going to end. You know, that we still maintain the freedom that we have as God's children.
I think that's a really good point, yes. Any other points of discussion on this?
We have accepted in our lives today as modern Americans, all kinds of ways that we like to remind ourselves. We can set our computer calendar, we have little things in our wristwatches, we have to remind us how many feet we walked today. I mean, we build in all kinds of things. So somebody is saying rebelling against this. That's kind of crazy because we already do it in so many other ways.
Yeah, and by setting some structure into making sure our spiritual life is in place too, in all different facets, then that will just, I think, augment all the other parts of our lives. That we won't just be floating around, but rather there will, if we're out for a walk, we might be looking for someone to talk to while we're out for a walk. You know, there are things that we can be more intentional about as we're about our day, if we're thinking along these lines. And so the next thing is for you to start thinking about your own lives and what you currently do. So I will send this to the people online later, but this is a sheet that says what I do now. And we couldn't decide which form to do, so we've got it on both sides. You can choose whichever one you want. But I sort of like the pie thing because it has other. One of the things that we talked about as a group planning this was these 5 practices probably are not all the things to think about. There's nothing about evangelism here. There's nothing about generosity. You know, there are other parts of our spiritual life that maybe aren't in these 5 practices. So there's a little spot on this side for other, because I think like generosity is a big one as far as our lives as well, living spiritually. And certainly evangelism and service. So you can either look at this, fill in this side, or this side if you want the more just basic one. And so this is what I do now. So it's good to have an account of where we are now. Like, what do you do for prayer now? You might be saying, I say grace at meals. You might be the prayer that you do each day. Or you might say, I wake up and I pray, and at night I pray, or, you know, whatever you are doing now, you just would indicate that. What you're doing for study. What you do for recreation and rest. When we say recreation, it's kind of rest and recreation. So the time when you're not busy doing things, when you've got your own alone time or whatever, what do you like to do? For work, and work we'll find out isn't just going to a job. Most of us are retired now, so our work might be a little bit different than they used to be. But what we do when we're being trying hard to accomplish something. And then for hospitality. So this is just for your own personal use, just so that we're starting to think about, okay, well, where am I right now in all this? And then at the very end, we'll do one, well, what would I like to be doing? And so we'll see if there's changes. It might be the same, but I'm sure for most of us, it will be some things that we think, well, I would like more of this. I once did a life circle in a different class with different, it wasn't a spiritual class, it had all different factors to it, your family life, your health, and all different things. And it was shocking to me when I really stopped to think what I was satisfied with and what I wasn't satisfied with. And then I hadn't been putting time into things, realized I wasn't very satisfied in that part of my life. And this is the same thing. We might find by actually looking at it that there are areas of our life that we're not as satisfied with as we'd like to be. And so this is a chance for us to sort of see that and acknowledge it. So you don't need to do in a group. We'll just pass these out. I intended to bring some forth and do that. So I'm going to grab some Bibles or something so you can write on something firm if you'd like that. And in the meantime, I'll pass these out. Do you like something to be on the break? Really pens? Okay. Okay, yeah, I'm just going to, we are getting to our time. So yeah, just get it started, obviously. You're not going to have time to do the whole thing. But get it started and then you'll take that home and be thinking about that. Does anyone want a book to put under it? Is there anyone else that didn't get one? We just have a couple of minutes to do this and then.
One of the missing parts could be under other, might be creativity.
Yeah, that's true. That could
I
be.
don't know, it seems to be missing.
It's interesting how we all see different things that are in our lives that are missing. That might be under your recreation as well, but it might not be. No, that could be. So that's why that one I like, because you can fill in the things or that you wish you. And so just as you're kind of thinking about that, just want to let you know that next week, as we said, the board will be talking about the practice of prayer. And so we'll be fleshing that out. Is there anything, board, you want to say before that?
Well, I'm not techie, so I probably won't have cool slides like you don't have for Danny, so we'll have to class will have to deal with it.
Well,
I'll have a handout.
you'll have a handout, okay. That's perfectly fine. And it all starts with prayer, really, doesn't it? That listening to God for direction, that's in prayer typically. And so that'll be a great starting to it. Okay, well, why don't we just end in prayer right now as well? Lord, we just thank you that you do have a plan for us. You have a purpose for our lives. You made each of us uniquely different, but connect us through your spirit, that you gave each of us gifts and people and circumstances that are ours to fill into, to live into. And so, Lord, we just ask that as we're thinking about what we currently do, that we're authentic with that, and that you will then be speaking to us about things that you would like us to do as well. Thank you for all of the people that are here today and for their openness to be able to think and talk about this. And we just lift this class and your calling for us to be disciples to you, that you will equip us for that. And Lord, be with the rest of the services we're going forward this morning. Be with Greg, for the family that is having the baptism. Will this be a special time of connection with you during that? And just all of the moving parts in the service will come together well. Thank you for this body of faith that we have the privilege to worship with. And we just give you praise and glory. Praise saying amen. Okay, thanks everyone for coming. Thank you guys for being here. See you later. So Julie. Julie.